got to a planet. I saw a species there. They had translucent skin. And there was a city, and my guides would take me through different experiences, which I came to understand as the Akashic Records. And what happens there is the hate that transfers from science to religion and religion to science is the equivalent of my left arm hating my right arm.
Our guest today is Serumaga. Elle had a near-death experience which left her with less than a 1% chance of survival after having an anaphylactic shock to a medication she had taken. During her NDE, Elle traveled through space to a different planet. She also accessed the Akashic Records and even met Jesus. This experience led her to pursue a doctoral degree in genetics and osteopathic medicine. Now she feels called to share her amazing story in order to help empower others spiritually and scientifically. So we want to welcome you to the show, Elle. We are so happy to have you join us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here.
Well, we're excited to talk with you today, and we cannot wait to hear your story. So I think that's a great place to start. If you could share with us about your near-death experience and what happened.
It was out of nowhere. I mean, I didn't expect for something like this to happen. And even before this, I didn't even really think much about near-death experiences. Maybe it's part of just my science mind, but whenever I heard about them, a lot of them were talking about people in the clouds and robes, and everything seemed very similar. And so I had a lot of doubt as to whether or not everybody would experience that, but I never really paid too much attention to it. I had an anaphylactic response to a medicine after being treated for what we thought was an infection. And I'm going into the ICU, being pushed in there when the code blue goes off. And I think at that time I was going in and out because I remember like pockets of that happening, and periodically saying to the nurses and attending staff, "Is that for me? Is that code blue for me?" And then I would, I guess blank out, and I wouldn't remember anything, and then come back in. So I think I was going in and out and didn't realize how serious the situation was. They stabilized me for a little while, but I just was not getting better. I just wouldn't stay stabilized. Ultimately, I developed, it's kind of comical. I sit with my doctors now and we kind of laugh because it seems so ridiculous because I ended up having septic shock, so complete sepsis, complete organ failure. While I was in a coma for 2.5 months, I developed MRSA and C. diff. So, I laugh about it now out of joy. Like, I know that seems kind of weird, but it feels...
No, it's a miracle. It's a miracle you're here.
Right, exactly. I get this joyous feeling because it's like, that's ridiculous, like all of that happening. Wow. So, and considering, my daughter used to tell me that the artificial lungs would fill with foam, meaning that I had all CO2 in my lungs. Wow. When that happens, it causes brain damage. I was able to go back to school after my incident. So I'm just flabbergasted and amazed and really grateful. But that being said, some things I learned through my experience was the whole experience of having an NDE is a cycle of time that if we could repeat in current life, I think that our whole society would be evolved. And what I mean by that is I went in and out of my body, of course. I responded to the frequency of music because I belonged to this church, and a lot of the people came and they sat by my bed in visitation pockets and would sing to me. one of the things that I learned on the other side is that we're all frequency, and our bodies resonate to frequency and music. And that's why it's so important. I learned that it helps to form our cells. It helps our DNA to respond. So music and sound is not just something that's, oh, this is really nice and I love how this sounds. It is actually medicine. It is actually, um, like taking a supplement, to help
Mhm.
us through
Yeah.
life. The entire universe was created with sound first.
Mhm.
Like the Bible says. I'm going to reference the Bible because that's what I'm familiar with. There was a sound first before there was light. The word was the sound. So we're kind of designed that way after the universe. When I went in my journey, going in and out of my body, there were times where I left and my guides would take me through different experiences, which I came to understand as the Akashic Records. And some people call that the life review. And what happens there is you kind of get answers to your questions. So some of the things that I learned were because I was curious about this before my experience. So I asked about it during my experience. I asked about, the nature of being a human being. Where did we originate? I was told that we are ETs ourselves, that we are family of other ET races. We're cousins, so to speak, of other ET races, and that there are other intelligent life out there in the universe that are that's much more vast and have been around a lot longer than we have. We're actually, of course, still in our primitive state, and that the earth was kind of like a boot camp, but also like a little bit of an experiment, but mostly things got a little out of control in our development. And you know how when some things happen that are not supposed to happen, and then God intervenes, and then everything ends up being okay anyway. So that's kind of the similar path that the way that the earth was created. The things that are okay are the fact that we've actually evolved into an intelligent species. We're going past that point of evolution where we're trying to create life the way that other ETs tried to help to create us. I learned that other ETs are not our gods. There's only one God, but they assisted in our evolution through genetic manipulation, through coming and helping us to understand how we should have ethics and morality and to get along. We're still trying to figure that out, obviously, but we're a combination of different ET races. And I found that fascinating. And even as I study genetics now, I see and hear about a lot of anomalous stuff that scientists just, they just kind of want to avoid talking about it because, it would make them seem like they don't have integrity. But with me, I feel like I went through this experience for a reason, and I'm not afraid to not appear. This is like crazy stuff or whatever.
Mhm.
I'm not afraid to talk about it. Another one of the things that I learned was that everything is conscious that's living. Every organism is conscious. And the things that I had experiences with were I kept on hearing merge into like different experiences and different things because that's how my guides were teaching me. They would just kind of like merge me into the thing or into the experience. And then I would get it basically. So it's kind of like if you say to somebody, "Oh, you'd had to be in my shoes to understand." So that's kind of like how the experience was. So I merged into, with a tree and found trees they're more intelligent than we are. They are very evolved. They're so evolved. That's why they're still. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, "Be still and know that I am God." That scripture's in there because it's designed to help us to understand what true evolution is. True evolution to the state of being that we're supposed to be at is to be able to be still and absorb and to take part in, to network with, just like trees, network in the ground with other trees. There are other trees that are so networked, they hold on to other stumps that are, trees that are half dead. They keep them alive for years just by being connected. That's how we're supposed to be. That's how we're supposed to be living. But we live in a world where it's not designed that way, not because it's not supposed to, but because we ended up building this matrix. When I say we, I'm talking about going back to the ancestors, industrial revolution, all of these different things, in society, going after money versus going after, being evolved. So those are the things that kind of got in the way of the state of being that we're supposed to exist in. So we live in a very unstill world. So we don't know how to merge into this world. But one of the reasons why God in the universe gives us the examples of things around us is because they're supposed to be metaphors. They're supposed to be clues to us as to how we're supposed to exist and live our life. For example, for people who have children, as an example, the nature of our relationship with the universe and with God. So some people say, well, what does God look like? Or are we like God? Or are we gods? Things like that. When you have a child, your child has your DNA. This is scientific fact. You carry the child's DNA in your bloodstream, even after giving birth. You're connected for life. Even if you try to disconnect, you're connected. Also, with children, guess what? They grow up. They have minds of their own. They go off and they do things and you can't stop them. That's how they are. So they have free will. But as their parent, you want to love them regardless. You want to assist them in life, but kind of let them do their thing. They're not perpetually indebted to you in society. That's the same way that God feels. So God has created us as a sense of expression of him, her, itself, and that's what we are. So we're kind of like the rays of the sunshine, where we're part of that, but also have an expression of our own. And so that's how, that's the reason that we were created. And all of that was created because God loved him, her, itself, and wanted to create other expressions of love of that. So it's kind of like, I'm going to use the example of your hair because I told you look like Pleiadian.
Which I'll take as a compliment, by the way.
You take part of your hair and, you say, well, this clump is beautiful. It's so like white and shiny or blonde and shiny. Then you take another part and you dye it pink and you're like, oh my gosh, that is so cute. I love how that looks. Then you take another part and you dye it blue and you're like, oh my gosh, look at all of them together. They look great together. And it's so cute. That's like us, basically. And that's like how God is creating us and how God created us, as different expressions of one clump of hair, basically.
So far, you have, for me, hit the nail on the head with being able to combine religion with an afterlife, with an ET, and making it so that it is a spiritual journey.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very powerful and it's very lovely because I feel like, as you probably know, because you mentioned people saying crazy, and that it's hard to put religion and extraterrestrials in
Yeah.
the same sentence.
Hmm.
And you just did it so beautifully
Oh,
that it really
thank
struck
you.
home for me. So thank you.
Thank
And
you for saying that.
I, how did you decipher between an ET and an angel while you were experiencing this?
That is a fabulous question. When people have NDEs, sometimes they don't actually know unless they're actually told. So I knew that I was experiencing an angel versus an ET because of the frequency and aura. For example, when I saw Jesus as a light body. I've also learned since then that Jesus's actual name is Yahusha, not Yeshua, but Yahusha, and that was his original name. So I saw Jesus as a light body and in his light body form, and that was then I knew. But the ETs were actually, as though they were part of a race or a group of people. So that's how I knew the difference. I've also since come to find out that the Anunnaki or the Anunnaj, which was an actual race, even in the Bible, was sometimes confused with angels. And that's where we get the word angel is from Anunnaj, which were Anunnaki beings. Some of them were, I should say. Yeah, so that's how I knew the difference between the angels and the ETs, because the ETs were like, could have been like you guys, just they like presented like they were actually beings of a species.
Wow. Okay. So I have a bunch of questions about that because,
Mhm.
as you know, on our channel, we like to explore the extraterrestrial alien UFO concept.
Mhm.
And and you may have already answered this, but how do you know for sure that it was an ET? Was that you said it was the frequency that it emits? Is that how you
Yes.
identify it? Okay.
Yeah.
And what kind of experiences did you have with them, or did you interact at all with them?
With the ETs, one of the times I was taken by one of my guides through space. So I was traveling in an orb form and I was flying, I was seeing nebula passing. And I've said this before, but when you're in a near death experience, you don't think of like, logical stuff. You're just present and you're just existing. So I didn't think to myself, whoa, there's no oxygen. Oh my gosh, I'm going to die. What's going on? I was just absorbing and I was in the moment and traveling and just, it was so beautiful. Got to a planet. I saw a species there. They had translucent skin, and there was a city. They were going about like some daily whatever that species does, and I was just with my guide in the corner just kind of observing, and the guide was speaking to me telepathically, and so there was kind of information being exchanged, like pointing like, see, they're doing that, yes, there's intelligent life in other planets, and on other planets they present your part, the human race is a part of a big group of intelligent life everywhere. So kind of getting in like my question answered. So that's what happened when I was there. Now, in the past few months, when I've seen different things like on social media where somebody was saying, there was an alien over there hiding behind something and looking at us, it kind of like comes back to me because I remember like for that species, I was the alien because I was in a corner and I was watching. I also didn't look the same. For them, I would have been deformed or disabled looking because I wasn't in the same frequency as them. I remember in one social media when they were, I think it was in Las Vegas, was it Nevada or Phoenix? Those
Las
people who,
Vegas.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So they were saying they were moving funny, like they didn't match up, like they were in a different, like glitching or something like that. And so that kind of like reminded me about my experience because I was like them in another world.
Did you have any interaction specifically, or you were just more observing?
I was more observing,
Okay.
yeah, with them.
And what was the planet that they were on like? Was it similar to Earth, or did it have a different topography? Or, we obviously have sunshine and things like that. Were you able to kind of take in what the environment was like?
Yeah, it was a different topography, very advanced buildings, like crystalline structure, like glassy, like a crystal like city, basically, similar to that. And
And they
oh,
talk
go
about
ahead.
that in the Bible, don't they? Isn't that one of the things that is referenced in the Bible about the crystal city and palace?
That's so funny that you mentioned that, and I'm glad that you did,
Hmm.
because since my NDE, I have like gone to the Bible with and like, oh my gosh, this is there. And even now, if you look at it, even what you were saying, Tracy, the merging of science and religion and combining ETs and religion, now like religious organizations already knew about this. They just didn't really express it much. The Pope and the things that he's talking about now, they knew this. They have lots of documents there.
Yeah, I know this time for us is where all things that are hidden will become seen.
Yes.
And we can see it in the media
Mhm.
every day. This
Mhm.
information is starting to leak out.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. I know the Bible has been edited quite a
Mhm.
bit,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of information that has been left out on purpose. Testimonies like yours are very important because you, like as Tracy said, you bring both sides together, the science and the spirituality. And I
Mhm.
think that's where a lot of people who are very pragmatic need to see that
Exactly.
information come out, right? They
Mhm.
need to be, they need, prove it to me, show me what the solid evidence is. And
Yeah.
so if we can bridge that gap, I think that's where we win more people over to understanding what the truth is.
Yeah. The hate that transfers from science to religion and religion to science is the equivalent of my left arm hating my right arm because they're just two sides. And science and prefer to say spirituality, they're supposed to be merged because God created science. And it's like you said, it's supposed to help us to evolve faster.
Absolutely. Tracy, did you have a question? Oh, Tracy's frozen. Maybe
No,
she's
I'm
not.
She's glitching in the matrix.
Yeah. All we see is you frozen on the screen right now.
Are
yeah,
you an alien,
Ooh.
Tracy?
really crazy. So I know I'm a hybrid.
I believe
You
Just
it.
look
bear
like one right now. So, Elle, did you find out any information about reincarnation, or what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Thank you so much for asking that. And yes, reincarnation is true. Doesn't matter if people don't believe in it. It is a thing, and it is what's going on with us. We have one soul and many lives. And reincarnation, again, if people merged a little bit of science with spirituality, reincarnation is a part of the whole path of the cycle of energy and the cycle of life. It's just a pattern. So reincarnation follows that same pattern. Everything goes in a circle, and everything is born, dies, and is born again. And, over and over, we recycle our garbage. We recycle other types of energy. Plants, they recycle themselves. And so it's kind of silly to think that we're not a part of that whole reincarnation cycle. So yeah, I was questioning, because of some traditional beliefs previously, I was on the fence. I wasn't totally sure. Now, yes, I know that the reincarnation is true.
And that does make sense because I know energy is neither created nor destroyed.
Hmm.
So, we have to transform into something
Exactly.
when we
Mhm.
move on from this time and space.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I always ask this question because it's something that's fascinating to me.
Mhm.
What do you think time is? I know a lot of near-death experiencers, when they cross over, they say there is no time, or some of
Mhm.
them feel like they were on the other side almost an eternity. So, what was that experience like for you, and how do you explain time?
Time, it was the same for me, where it just like I don't really have a concept of time. Even in my NDE, when I explain it, It's not chronological as far as like, I can try to analyze it and think, okay, this probably happened here because my family told me this particular thing happened or whatever. But other than that, there's no sense of time on the other side. What time is just our own organizational structure. It's not a real thing. It doesn't really actually exist in the universe. Everything is happening at the same quote unquote time. So there's not really a sense of time. It just is.
That's just so fascinating to me because, and I know I've said this before, but if we're all in just this present moment
Mm-hmm.
and there's no past and there's no future, it's always just the present moment, then that means that everything has already happened that
Mm-hmm.
could potentially happen.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
There are what we would call past events, but they're not actually past events. They're like ripples of observations, basically.
Mm.
So kind of like, so we call them past events, and they are things that happened before, but it's all a part of the same time structure. So meaning that, like, imagine everything happening in a sphere versus on a linear plane or something like that. So in that sense, we kind of observe it as a past thing only because our observation is in the future of what that thing is, but it's not, in reality, it's not the past. It's happening at the same time. People, when they've emailed me, some people have said, boy, I wish I had my own near-death experience, and this is why I watch them. Well, I believe that we're supposed to have a near-death-like experience while we're alive without having the trauma and the headaches and everything that comes along with the near-death experience. I think that that's one of the reasons why NDEers are meant to share their stories, because they can share, and hopefully, as you're exposed to that, you get opened up to these concepts, and then you're able to live out your life as though you had a near-death experience without having to go through the trauma of it.
Right. I
Mhm.
agree. And I love that way of explaining it because obviously I don't want to go through my own near death experience. I choose not to, whoever's listening. Um, but if there's a way to have that experience, a similar type of feeling, where you're connected to everything, do
Mhm.
you have a recommendation for something like that? Is there something that you would suggest that we can do in this life in order to connect back to God or the creator, whatever we like to call that?
Everyone wants a quick fix, like even things like, oh, I'm going to take mushrooms, I'm going to do this or whatever. And I'm not saying that those things are bad, but what I'm saying is that, and one of the things that I learned in my NDE, we're so incredibly powerful. We've been deliberately diffused because we are a bomb. We're a walking bomb. That's how energetic we are. In fact, I learned something some time ago that when we die, we emit enough energy to power a city of like New York for a week. That's
Wow.
how much energy that we emit. So we basically, are in this container. We have so many capabilities. We just need to tap into them. So the thing that I always recommend is to take the slow route, is to meditate. People don't realize what state they can get to just through meditation. Like we were talking about before we actually started recording, that these notable physicists like Nikola Tesla, well, he wasn't a physicist, he was an engineer, but anyway, he worked with physics. Nikola Tesla, Einstein, Oppenheimer, they all just got divine information through dreams, through meditations, and they changed the world in what they did. We all have that capability. It's just our world is designed where we don't slow down enough to realize that. So we think, oh my gosh, I need to go and get this, or I need to take this in order to get there. But we're essentially a crystal and a frequency. So we're a bomb. You're the bomb.
I'm going to remind myself of that next time. So we need to trust ourselves, is what
Yeah.
I'm hearing you say. And we need to know that everything that we possibly need is already inside of us.
Yes. Thank you for annotating my very long
No,
explanation.
your description is way better, but I just always have to put things in my own
Mhm,
concept to make sure I
mhm,
understand it properly.
mhm.
So Tracy is back, although she looks like she's frozen again. Are you there with us, Tracy?
She's in her alien body again.
I know. She can't help herself. So, Elle, I did have a question. I know you mentioned at the beginning of your NDE story that sound plays a big role in
Yeah.
all of this, right? In the
Mhm,
creation of the universe, which I've also heard that before. People
mhm,
talk about in the beginning it was the word, right? The Bible even says that.
mhm,
And what is a word? A word is actually a sound.
mhm,
So, for me, I translate that into harmonics being
mhm,
really a very important thing. And I don't think that we use that very much in this day and age. And
mhm.
from what I understand, in the times of Atlantis and Lemuria, they actually did use harmonics to
Yes.
build their buildings. And that was
Yes.
really how they were able to move the large
Mhm,
stones that they had, which from our viewpoint at this point in time, we
mhm,
don't understand how they did that because they
mhm,
didn't seem to have the equipment for that, right?
mhm.
So is that information also that you may have taken back with you from your experience?
Yeah, there's so many ways that we're deficient in using sound that would amplify, no pun intended, our life. And things like the pyramids, they're not tombs. They're electromagnetic machines, basically. They are supposed to emit sound, they're supposed to help open portals, things like that. I saw something the other day with babies being there, like a sound bowl being played right next to their ears when they're crying. They
Mhm.
immediately stop, and that's because they're doing what's natural, which is resonating with the sound, and the sound resonates with them, and that's how we're supposed to be because of our industrialized and matrixy world. A lot of our sounds get tuned out that are actually there to help us on a cellular level, to help us, otherwise. Only more recently, frequency has started being used in medicine a lot more, or at least acknowledged in medicine more than it used to be. And that's one of the reasons why I was inspired, because in my NDE, I was inspired by how frequency can literally change your entire environment and your world. And I wanted to incorporate that into practicing medicine and even observation of genetics or experiments and things like that. So, sound is super important for sure.
Can you share a little bit more with us about your studies that you're pursuing right now and what actually led you into going down that path?
When I came back, even though I was healed from a lot of different things, it triggered other issues. It triggered, things that I needed to find a treatment plan for. And my doctors, and I had to go through a lot of doctors and being heard. And, so I'm really also into medical advocacy, making sure that you're getting the treatment that you feel you deserve. And I started doing research on my own situation. I came up with a treatment plan for myself based on what they told me was available. I started researching my genes. I started researching other people's genes. I started researching genetics in general. I started seeing what I was told in my NDE about our bodies and our whole presentation as human beings being so powerful, as well as anomalous and mixed with other DNA. I started seeing through the research confirmations of all of that. So that's what inspired me. And I thought to myself, oh man, that's a lot of school. I don't know.
It is a lot.
So, I felt kind of tired when I thought about it.
I bet.
But it was just, it was so fascinating. And I felt called, and my guides were kind of telling me, look, you can do this. You need to do this. And there needs to be more expressions like this in medicine, of people who think like this in medicine, in order for even our medical care to change and for medicine to evolve. I was in a class, the teacher brought up the topic of tardigrades. Are you familiar with tardigrades?
No.
I'm not.
Tardigrade is an extremophile. They look like little budgie bears. They're so cute. Okay. But they're an extremophile. They can live in space. They can live in extreme heat, extreme cold. They can be in a hibernated state for years, and then all of a sudden they're waking back up again. My teacher was surprised that I knew about tardigrades because she was going on about them. So we got into a conversation, and then I said to her, wouldn't it be interesting if, from a genetic perspective, we found a way to merge some of our DNA with tardigrades? Because if we did that, we would be able to travel to space further than before, and go places and do things differently. Not saying that I agree with genetic manipulation, but it was just like theoretically speaking. And so she said, oh yeah, that's interesting. Maybe about like 5 months later, I'm going through my news feed. Scientists have just successfully merged human DNA with tardigrade DNA.
Wow.
All of us pick up information. That's why we get certain ideas and other people have the similar idea. And it's because some of these things are meant to come to fruition to evolve our society.
One other thing I wanted to ask you is, we have had other near-death experiencers share their stories with us. And it seems that a lot of times they either come back with knowledge that they didn't have prior. Like we had one of our guests spoke about having knowledge of sacred geometry when they came back. We had another guest who came back with psychic abilities and became a medium. Did you have any of those experiences, or did you take anything back with you from the other side?
I got a lot of information, and honestly, I didn't talk about my NDE for 7 years because I was trying to wrap my head around not only the experience, but the information that I got. One part of the Akashic Records that I went through was seeing certain future events that I didn't realize at the time were future events. So I was given a lot of information, and if I was told that, I didn't remember the context, like, oh, this is going to happen. But I started seeing those things develop. I shared about that previously, and then these things would unfold after the fact. So that's how I started seeing that they were prophetic events. I was intuitive before, but I've become stronger intuitively and more connected to my guides. So I receive information faster and in real time. Like when I'm talking to somebody, I can, receive information. Basically, when you start expressing yourself from a soul perspective and looking at things from that perspective, you can look at something and you won't just see like a person, you'll see inside of them, you'll see their aura around them. It's like more of a 3D observation of the whole being instead of just like flat, like I see your face and I see what you're wearing. So I co-founded an organization called Near Death Institute, and it's to help people get through that journey and to meet peers, to walk with other people on that journey, get questions answered, get resources. And it's been an amazing experience to be able to do so.
Elle, we want to thank you so much for sharing your story of perseverance and transformation with us. We hope that the information that you shared today will bring others some hopefulness and will inspire them on their path of transformation as well. I know you also have a book that you co-authored. It is titled Death, a Compilation of Transformation Near-Death Experiences, which we can find on Amazon, but we'll also put the link in the description for this. So in closing, Elle, can you leave us with any positive thoughts for anyone listening?
2024 is the year to really dive in to who you are and your personal power and what you can do to affect change, because in 2025, you'll have to hold on for the ride. So definitely do that. But know in everything that happens, we're going to be okay. And if you're doing the work, you're definitely going to be okay. So don't fear at all.
Well, thank you so much for that little foretelling there, but also for the information that you shared today. We very much appreciate your time, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Al.